Hey everybody, welcome back to an all new episode of 10 to Life with me, Annie Elise. I am bundled up today. I'm really cold. I kind of feel I don't know why I have my coat tied and wrapped because I'm so cold. I kind of feel I'm in my Olivia Pope era right now. I don't know if you guys ever watched Scandal, but I don't know why I put my hair back in a bun today. I have my earrings. I'm wearing all ivory. I'm just very profesh today, guys. No, I feel I don't know. I feel where's my Nirvana graphic tee, right? But anyway, I'm cozy. That's all that matters. And by the way, this coat I got from Quince. You guys know I'm obsessed with Quince. I think I have a promo code if you guys want to use it. I think it's just quince.com/AE. I'll double check. But I am obsessed with everything they sell. I just bought 3 new coats, and this is what they call their butter cashmere. It is so soft and cozy. I also have bought their bed sheet. This isn't an ad, sorry, I'm just rambling now. I bought their bamboo bed sheets. I've purchased their cashmere little sets, their top and joggers, their pajamas. I just bought a linen shirt. I again bought 3 coats just last week. They already arrived. They ship so fast. But yeah, if you guys have been sleeping on Quince, 1000% you need to check it out. Sorry, I know that, I swear that wasn't an ad. This is from Quince. No, just the code is today. But I just love them. I told my sister-in-law about them. I buy their throw blankets too. They're cashmere throw blankets, guys, with the tassels on the end. Every single night I'm rolled up on my couch in that. So just a life hack if you've never heard of them. But anyway, that's not what you're here to talk about today. Today's case, it's one that, how do I want to describe it? It's one that as a parent is of course heartbreaking and terrifying, but also it's one that kind of makes you wonder how things like this can even possibly happen. And the reason I say that is, imagine that your child goes missing. Then an investigation, when they're looking for your child, reveals that they were literally taken right off your front doorstep. Because that's what today's case is about. A girl walks home from school, she makes it to her apartment building, but then she never gets into the unit of her apartment's front door. It's an especially twisted case, and I want to warn you, it also involves extreme brutality and some very strange clues and evidence along the way. So it's a recent one too. The trial is still ongoing. Maybe it's wrapped by the time this airs. I will see. But actually, did the trial even start? Is the person's in custody? Whatever. I need to shut up and get to it. But what I wanted to say by that is it's recent and it's horrifying. So guys, I'm going to stop talking. Let's jump right in. In 2022, Lola Daviet was 12 years old. She was a very pretty, very athletic young girl. She had bright, long blonde hair, fair skin, kind of a little sharp, pointed nose, these sparkling blue eyes. And she had been born on July 18th, 2010 in Béthune, France. Her parents were Johan and Delphine, and she also had 2 brothers, Jordan and Thibaut. Now, Lola's parents were property managers for a whole bunch of different apartment complexes, and this included the one where they lived in Paris. So Lola grew up in an apartment, and her mom and her dad were the ones who were responsible for keeping it, in great condition, making sure that everything was working right, just property management type stuff. Lola also went to school in Paris, where she was truly a great student. However, her real passion in everything was gymnastics. Lola was an incredible athlete, and for the 2021-2022 gymnastics season, she had made it into this very competitive, very elite team. She was competing against some of the best gymnasts in all of France, really just pushing herself to be the best that she could possibly be. Lola was an extremely happy kid. She was the sort of person who also just never sat still and never sat down. She always wanted to go somewhere. She wanted to be outside. She wanted to go hang out with her friends. And I mean, it makes sense, right? I imagine that you have to be pretty high energy to be a good gymnast. I would imagine you're doing all the flips, the running, the this, the that, all of it. But it sounds like that was the case for Lola. Just always up, always on her feet, and really a great athlete. So it's no wonder people were just drawn to her, attracted to her. She had a very large friend group. However, out of all of her friends, Lola's best friend was her mom. They told each other everything. They were just extremely close. Most days, Lola would go to school until the early afternoon, and then she would go home to see her parents. She also lived really close to the school, so it wouldn't take any time at all for her to make it back home. She'd usually be home by 3:15 or 3:30 at the latest. And that was especially true on Fridays. See, Lola's family owned a second home where they lived, the town where Lola had been born, and on weekends they would kind of head out there for just a little getaway. It was a normal thing that they did. It was part of the routine. So if it was a Friday, Lola would always make it a point to head straight home from school. She wouldn't just hang around. She wouldn't lollygag. So I don't know if that's dating me using that term, but like she just always would go home, not messing around with her friends. It was important to get back so that they could hit the road and get the weekend started. So that was the plan on Friday, October 14th, 2022. By this time, Lola was 12 years old, and she had been sticking to this routine for years. It wasn't a problem, and it definitely wasn't an issue for her. It wasn't something that she was going to forget about or out of the norm. It was part of her routine. Except what wasn't part of the routine is that she didn't get home on time that day. It got to be 3:30, then 3:45, then 4 o'clock, and this whole time, there was no sign of her whatsoever. Now, by 4:30, Lola still wasn't home, and her parents were worried. And worried might actually be understating it a little bit because they were terrified at this point. This was so unlike Lola, and her dad ended up calling the police to report her missing. The police officer that he talked to said that they would send somebody over right away, which was really good news because it sounded like the authorities were taking this situation seriously. But her dad and her mom didn't want to wait. They wanted answers right now. So while the police were still on their way over and hadn't made it there yet, the two of them decided to do some own investigating on their own. Now, like I mentioned before, her dad and mom were property managers of their apartment building, which meant they had access to all of the building's security cameras. So they didn't need to ask anyone for permission or wait for a warrant or anything like that. They just pulled the footage up and started watching it. What they were looking for and what they wanted to see most of all is if Lola even made it home from school. Maybe she walked in the front door and then went over to a friend's apartment, or maybe she walked in and then left again. So her parents weren't sure what to expect when watching the footage, but they knew that they wanted to check it out. And as they were watching, they found something. At 3:20 p.m., right around the time when Lola usually got home, the footage showed her walking into the building through the front door. The only thing was, she wasn't alone. She was with somebody else, someone who looked like a young woman. The woman was wearing a gray jacket and light-colored pants, and she wasn't very tall, but she was pretty thin and just a small-looking person overall. She had dark hair, olive-tanned skin, and Lola had on the same clothes that she had been wearing when she left that morning, pants and a top that were both white. The woman looked somewhat familiar to her parents, but not exactly 100%. It was almost like maybe she was a friend of a resident and they had seen her in the apartment complex before, just something that looked familiar. Now, obviously, they were pretty well aware of who lived in the building and who the typical visitors were, but they just couldn't quite put their finger on where they had seen this woman before. The point is, though, clearly Lola had been with this woman at 3:20 p.m. when she got to the apartment building, which, by the way, was the time that she usually did arrive home. And that meant that something had happened to her between then and when she would usually get to the front door of her unit. So it was natural to assume that this woman, whoever she was, she might have had something to do with Lola's disappearance, or at the very least know what happened and where Lola went or who she was talking to. So in fact, right away, her mom posted on Facebook and she said, "Alert, abduction of our daughter Lola, seen last time at 3:20 in the company of a girl that we don't know in our residence." Now, when the police got there, her dad showed them the footage right away. Then they started looking all over the complex trying to find Lola. They tried to also find the woman from the cameras, or in a perfect world, find both of them. Then at some point, they went into the building's cellar. And down there, they found duct tape and a box cutter. Now, on its own, that's not too alarming. Those are tools that you might use if you're packing something up. Maybe you're mailing it somewhere. Maybe you're just like moving in, moving out. But according to the police, there were also signs of a struggle. Unfortunately, they weren't more detailed than that when they released that information. So I don't know what signs of a struggle they actually found, but it was enough to make them feel very uneasy about the box cutter and the duct tape. They weren't thinking that those were just shipping or packing supplies or moving supplies. They thought that somebody had used that supplies to hurt Lola. So now the investigation was very high stakes. Everyone thought that it was incredibly urgent for them to find Lola. Unfortunately, though, the next breakthrough in the case didn't come through until around 11 p.m. that night. At that time, a homeless man called the police, and he said that he had been looking for a safe place to just lie down for the night. When he was looking around, he ended up in a courtyard that wasn't too far from the family's apartment complex. And while he was there, he saw 2 suitcases and a large plastic trunk just sitting out right in the open in the courtyard. But that's not why he called the police. Apparently, this guy's curiosity had gotten the better of him, so he decided to go and open these things up, and he opened the trunk first. At the very top, there were a whole bunch of linens, so the guy pulled them out one right after another, and then he noticed that there was something buried deeper underneath these linens, and it was a dead body, namely the body of a young girl with blonde hair. So, of course, the police responded to the call and went to go collect this young girl's body, and sadly, it was identified as being Lola. Some reports say that she was naked with her hands and feet bound. There was also a piece of tape over her mouth. She had cuts all over her body and a deep wound on her neck. But those cuts and the wound on her neck weren't what killed her. Her autopsy actually said that she had suffocated. In fact, those stab wounds were all post-mortem. Someone had choked her to death, and then after she was dead, they stabbed her multiple times. And the wound that was on her neck, even post-mortem, was so deep that it almost decapitated her. Now, when I first heard all of that, my first thought was, why all of the, stab wounds and things post-mortem? Why are you stabbing someone and cutting their throat so deep it almost decapitates them? Unless that's what you were trying to do because you were trying to dispose of evidence. However, that doesn't account for the other various stab wounds on the body. It would only account for that one. But it just also shows that, again, this is just me, I'm not a psychologist, but it seems as though there's like a level of brutality involved in that, where there's got to be like some underlying hatred or anger, or why, once somebody's already dead, once they've suffocated, why would you go to those measures, right? It makes you wonder. Now, there was another detail from the autopsy that also came out, and it was very, very strange, very hard to understand. But there were two numbers on Lola's feet. One foot had a 1 on the bottom of it, and the other foot had a 0 on the bottom of it. Now, I'm going to say right now that I did a lot of research for this case because I wanted to understand what the deal was with those numbers, but unfortunately, I don't quite know. It hasn't really been made public, or there hasn't been any theories really out there that I have found that have been credible. A lot of the news coverage is pretty contradictory. Some places say that these numbers were stuck to Lola's feet with sticky notes, like the killer almost wrote these numbers on a Post-it pad or a sticky pad and then stuck the notes to her feet. Other places say that they were written in a red pen. I've even read that they were tattooed on her feet. I've even seen some people saying that they were almost branded or like imprinted into her skin. Like someone needed some sort of special equipment to literally brand it down, like put a 0 onto one foot, put a 1 on the other foot. The fact is, I don't know which of those reports is true. They're all very different. However, they all agree that one foot had a 1 on it and one foot had a 0 on it. But besides that, there's no consistency on how the numbers actually got there. And clearly, these numbers had to mean something, right? They didn't just end up there by accident. So were they supposed to be some kind of message? Were they trying to track her as like what victim number? Was it potential trafficking and that's how they were going to identify her? I don't know. But what were they and what were they supposed to communicate? So overall, the police were pretty stumped when they tried to figure out what the meaning was. It was just a very chilling and confusing detail, and please let me know what you guys think that could have meant. So instead, while they were confused, they decided to focus on trying to figure out who had done this to Lola. The good news is that Paris is full of security cameras. I mean, all over the place. I mean, it's a huge city with businesses, apartments, homes, all of these different things, and it really took no time at all for the police to find some different clips that helped them start to build a bit of a timeline of Lola's disappearance. At around 5 p.m. on Friday, the same day that Lola went missing, a young woman appeared on those cameras dragging this huge trunk with suitcases all around the city with her. And that woman resembled the same woman from that security footage from Lola's building, even wearing the same outfit. And when the police tried to figure out who this woman was, they realized that she had a sister who lived in the same complex as Lola. Now, I'm not entirely sure how they figured this out, but they're investigators and they did. So the very next day, just a little over 12 hours after Lola's disappearance, the police found both this woman and her sister just kind of out walking around in the city. It was Saturday, October 15th at around 8 a.m. And the women were 26-year-old Friha and 24-year-old Dabia Benkir. Now, Friha was the one who lived in the apartment building. The apartment was hers, sort of, which I'll get into some of that complicated stuff later on. But Dabia was her sister, and she was the woman who had showed up on that security camera. So it made sense why police arrested Dabia. She was the one on that security camera with Lola. However, it isn't too clear why they also took Freya in for questioning, but I'm assuming it's because she was the one who actually lived in the building. So police wanted to be sure, that she wasn't involved. Now, as it turns out, this was not Dabia's first brush with the police. Reportedly, somebody had assaulted her back in 2018, and there isn't much information about this attack that's public, but I do know that she went to the authorities at that time for help. Then, a year later, she popped up on the police's radar again. But this time, she wasn't a victim. She was the one who assaulted somebody else. Actually, 2 other women. Basically, Dabia had an appointment with the doctor, and at first everything was normal. Everything went fine. She got her exam, she took care of whatever was going on, whatever. But then, when it was time to leave, the receptionist told her that she had to, pay for the appointment. Well, Dabia didn't want to pay. She was pissed. She didn't want to pay at all. And I don't know the full details of what went on during her appointment, but Dabia claimed that she had come in wanting something specific and then she didn't get whatever that thing was. So in her mind, why would she pay for a service that she hadn't received? From there then, things got heated. 2 receptionists ended up getting involved, saying, you don't get to see a doctor and then afterward just say that you're unhappy and refuse to pay. It's not like sending a dish back at a restaurant because it's not what you ordered. It's like you saw the doctor. Except Dabia kept putting her foot down and saying that she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't give anyone any of her money. Then she hit both of the women. Now, one of those women fought back, and it sounds to me like Dabia was one of these, cowardly bully types. They're only violent against people who are too small or too scared to defend themselves, because as soon as she got hit with any kind of resistance, Dabia announced that she was leaving, and she just headed for the door. And as she was on her way out, she yelled, "I'll come back. You don't know what I'm capable of." Sure enough, she came back the next day just like she had threatened to. And as for what she was capable of, well, from the sounds of it, it sounds like she was capable of calming down and realizing that she had been out of line. Because when she showed up, she came with a friend who also helped her pay for her bill. They were both just calm, chill, polite, and normal. There was no real drama. Though still, the 2 receptionists still ended up reporting Dabia for her behavior because, let's be real, she was completely out of line. Except, and you see this so many times, the receptionists were the ones who were punished for doing the right thing. When their company had heard all about what happened, all of the details, they ended up firing the receptionist who had fought back, which is kind of unbelievable, right? But getting back to the investigation around Lola's disappearance and murder, the police realized right off the bat that Freya and Dabia were not French. They were actually both from Algeria. They had both come to France on student visas back in 2016. Back then, they had been living with their mother, who was already set up and established in France. And I know that by 2022, their father had passed away, although I'm not exactly sure when that happened. But besides that, Freya told the police that she and Dabia had both had a really rough time when they first got to France. The 3 of them, Freya, Dabia, and their mother, were all living in a very tiny apartment above a restaurant. It wasn't very much space for a family of 3, but eventually they got a bigger place. Well, not long after they settled into the new apartment, their mother apparently died of cancer. Now, Freya ended up subletting an apartment in Lola's building. The person who usually lived there was on a long international vacation, so Freya was just there temporarily. Dabia crashed with her every now and then, but for the most part, it was Freya who was doing the subletting. But then, there started to also become some tension between the 2 sisters. According to Freya, Dabia had some pretty serious mental health issues. This affected her behavior and made it hard for other people to get along with her or even want to be around her. Freya's actual words were, "Dabia is the bad seed of the family because she always causes problems. Even when my parents were sick, she caused a lot of worry." And that's how Dabia was apparently most of the time. But after her mother's death, things got even worse. Dabia began lashing out in more alarming ways, doing drugs, manipulating people, and sometimes getting so messed up that she couldn't even have a coherent conversation. When Dabia was sober and calm, she would lie about anything and everything, and just always wanting to kind of spin things in her own favor. So Freya finally reached a breaking point. She had to put her foot down and set some boundaries with her sister. And when she told Dabia that she couldn't live with her anymore, Dabia ended up basically homeless. I mean, she didn't have a job. Freya was paying her rent thanks to a job at a bakery, but Dabia didn't have anything like that. There were a few friends who would let her, come over, crash on a couch here and there, but like Freya, they all eventually reached their limit and they just told Dabia, you gotta go, you gotta get out of here. Now, if you ever looked at Dabia's social media, you never would have guessed any of this. She posted a lot on TikTok, just a lot on social media in general, and she came across as very normal. Her videos always showed her smiling, dancing, singing. She was always dressed really nicely with her hair and makeup done. Behind the scenes, though, Daviet was clearly unwell. She had some issues. And based on what her sister had said, the detectives were also expecting for her to be some kind of master manipulator during the interrogation. You know, being able to explain everything and anything away. She'd have all kinds of cover stories. She would be an expert at lying. Except that wasn't what happened. Not at all. Basically, the police sat Daviet down, and right away, without any kind of prodding at all, she admitted she had killed Lola. According to Daviet, she saw Lola and struck up a conversation with her outside of the apartment complex. She told Lola that she lived in the same building as her, and it's not clear, but it seems like maybe they had recognized each other, or they had at least seen each other before, going in and out of the building, and so they were able to then make some small talk. Now, I will say 12-year-olds can be pretty savvy, especially when they're used to living in a big city and getting around, and so I can see where Lola was doing this independently, and there you had Daviet, who was this older person, and somehow gained Lola's trust. But then she used that trust, and she lured her into her sister's 6th floor apartment, which Frio wasn't home at the time, I want to be clear. But once the two of them were inside that apartment, things took an incredibly dark and very sinister, satanic turn. First, Daviet forced Lola to get into the shower. And then, after the shower, Daviet assaulted Lola. Specifically, she also forced this innocent, helpless 12-year-old little girl to perform oral sex on her. I mean, it's enough to make you want to throw up. It's just truly horrendous, terrible stuff. Now, the details surrounding what exactly went on in that apartment aren't totally clear. It hasn't been released what all went down, and I can't even imagine what other horrors Lola had to endure at the hands of Daviet. But there is some speculation, and we don't know a lot that is for certain, but we do know the, assault element of it and what that entailed. So once Daviet was done, she then put tape over Lola's mouth and nose. And in the statement that she gave to the police, she said that that was all that she did. She apparently wasn't necessarily trying to suffocate Lola, but that's what happened anyway, because Lola couldn't breathe. And because of that, she of course died. Now that's what Daviet said. But I have my doubts about all of it because I don't entirely believe her story, and that's for a few reasons. First, Lola's autopsy said that her spine was compressed. Now, I'm not exactly sure what is meant by this, which I'm kind of curious if you guys know if there's any medical professionals, but I'm wondering, did Daviet press down on Lola's spine? Did she strangle her with such force that her spine was compressed? Like if she was holding her down while she was attacking her and strangling her? The details are very unclear. But second, we know that Daviet stabbed Lola a bunch of times after she was dead. And that's something Daviet confessed to as well. She didn't deny it. But I have to wonder, if you weren't trying to kill someone, and then they died anyway, would your first thought be to grab a knife and just start stabbing, as opposed to, trying to help that person, or maybe even feeling horrified about what you had done? To me, it feels more like Daviet wanted to hurt Lola or punish her, and the strangling just maybe wasn't punishment enough. Lastly, Daviet's story didn't totally fit the evidence at the crime scene. Like I mentioned before, there was evidence of a struggle inside the cellar, but Daviet made it sound like the assault and the murder all happened in her sister's apartment. So maybe she was leaving something out, I'm not really sure. Maybe some of that stuff did happen in the cellar and she just said that it was all in the apartment. I don't know, it's hard to say for sure. But there's one last thing too in all of this that really drives home in my mind, that Daviet is a liar who cannot be trusted. And that's because she gave this whole confession, told the police everything, and then she took it all back. She was totally flip-flopping. I mean, first she said, yeah, she did it, but then she said, no, she didn't do it. At one point, she actually tried to even say that she had a bad dream that she had committed the murder. Like somehow she just got that confused with reality. Then she said that it was a stranger with a gun who did it, but it's not even clear if she was even trying to make that story make sense. Like, was she there when the stranger with the gun showed up? Did she witness it? Did the stranger allegedly abduct Lola and take her into Fria's apartment while Daviet happened to be there? It's not clear and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And basically, her entire story made no sense. And it gets even more insane, if you can believe that. Because then it went from her doing it to a stranger doing it to a ghost doing it. A ghost. Pause for reaction. Like, what? What do you mean? Which in this moment, I can't help but think about Lola's parents, because how awful would it be in and of itself to have to identify your child's murderer, then only to have them confuse things and lie about your child's last moments. Instead of getting closure, it's almost somehow worse because you're not getting all of these mixed answers. So at one point, police showed her a picture of Lola's dead body. And Daviet actually said, "That doesn't make me hot or cold. I was sexually assaulted and I saw my parents die in front of me." Just kind of like, why should that affect me? Why should that bother me? Here's what happened to me. She then claimed that she actually thought that Lola was Lola's mom, who was actually the property manager. Now, apparently, even though Lola was, yes, only 12 years old, she and her mom did look pretty similar. They had the same build, the same hair color, and it actually wasn't that unusual for people to confuse the two of them. Which you might be thinking, okay, but how does that even help her case if she tried to say, it's not Lola I was after, it was her mom? Why is it some great defense to say you were trying to sexually harm and then murder a grown adult? Well, Daviet said that one time she had asked Lola's mom if she could have a key card so that she could get in and out of the front door whenever her sister wasn't there. But her mom, being the property manager and taking security very seriously, refused. She reminded Daviet as well that she didn't actually live there. Not to mention, Freya also technically wasn't even on the lease. She was subletting. And I bet that whoever actually rented that apartment wasn't thrilled at the idea of random strangers off the street like getting their own key cards and having access to the building, right? So it sounds like Lola's mom made a really good decision there. She made a smart call. She didn't cooperate with Daviet, but Daviet was pissed about that. So, of course, her being super upset, I mean, she didn't like being told no, so she told the police that she wanted to kill Lola's mom, but then decided to kill Lola instead. But again, even once she admitted this, she tried to take it all back once more. Like I said, it was always just back and forth with this woman, confessing, then unconfessing. I mean, she honestly just could not make her mind up. Still, though, she definitely had said enough. The police were pretty confident that Daviet had killed Lola, and they had plenty to hold her on even without a confession. First, there was that security camera footage that I mentioned before, which it clearly showed her dragging around the suitcases and the trunk where Lola's body was eventually found. And the weird thing is that in the footage, Daviet seemed happy, not remorseful at all. I mean, she was even striking up conversations with people on the street, having like this nice, relaxed Friday evening. At one time, she actually dropped the trunk and the suitcases right there on the sidewalk, like they weren't even important or held anything important at all. Then she walked to a nearby cafe, had a coffee, had a croissant. I mean, just acted like nothing was wrong. Seriously, she was acting so casual while carrying around the body of the 12-year-old girl that she had just assaulted and murdered. And eventually, the police tracked down some of the people who actually talked to Daviet on the street. And the wild thing is, even though she looked relaxed in the security footage, apparently she didn't sound relaxed in person. In fact, a lot of people thought that she was very memorable just because of how weird she was acting the entire time. Apparently, she kept begging people to help her carry the suitcases and the trunk, and pretty much everyone told her no. I mean, her behavior was so off that nobody wanted to get involved with whatever she was doing. But on top of that, there was visible blood on the trunk, and it smelled like cleaning products. So, I mean, red flags were going off for all sorts of people, and nobody wanted to help her. Eventually, Daviet got so desperate that she started offering to pay people. But still, nobody wanted to get involved, and nobody wanted to get mixed up with her. At least, not until a car pulled over. And that's when the police found footage of Daviet getting into this car, and then riding it all the way out of the city. Now, interestingly, she still had the trunk and the suitcases with her when she got into that car. And since we know they were later found not too far from Lola's apartment, that means that she dragged the body and everything that was with her in those trunks and suitcases all the way out of Paris, but then brought them back to the city to dump them. Which is super weird, right? I mean, it's just such bizarre behavior and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So the police had questions, and luckily they were able to track down the driver. It was a 43-year-old man named Amin, and like a lot of things in this case, unfortunately, we don't know a whole lot about his background. But Amin said that he did know Daviet. He said that they were friendly with one another. On that day, Daviet had called him for help, and he came and picked her up. Then he took her to his house outside of Paris, where she stayed for a couple of hours. Daviet had the trunk and the suitcases with her, but Amin claimed that he didn't know at all what was inside of them. So anyways, after being at his house for a while, Daviet called a cab and then went back to the city with the trunk and suitcases in tow. Which, I mean, who knows what Daviet was thinking in this moment? Maybe she had a plan for disposing of Lola's body and changed her mind. I don't know. Maybe she just wasn't thinking clearly, which she obviously wasn't, considering what she had done. But now, with Amin's testimony, the police now thought that there were at least 6 people who were involved with the murder or its cover-up in some type of way. Not necessarily that they were all guilty, just that they had some kind of role that they played within it or bearing witness to it. There were Freya and Daviet, of course. There was Amin, also Amin's roommate. The police also thought that that roommate might know something, but they eventually decided he wasn't involved in at all, so he was let go after some questioning. But along the way, they also questioned that homeless man who had found Lola's body. And the same thing, there was no sign that he had done anything wrong, so he was let go. But the 6th person is someone who I don't know anything about. Their identity wasn't released, and there was no evidence that they had broken any laws or done anything wrong, so they apparently were let go of too. So that left Freya, Daviet, and Amin. Now, Freya also didn't have anything to do with Lola's murder, but her visa had expired, so she still got arrested and eventually deported. Amin was charged with helping conceal a body, and Daviet was charged with murder of a minor under 15, sexual harm with torture, and acts of barbarism. Now, while she was waiting for her trial, the authorities actually kept her in solitary confinement because of the obvious psychological problems and issues, which also seems kind of weird since you would think that solitary confinement would make whatever mental health problem she might have even worse. And it does sound like they did get worse. I mean, she was banging her head against the walls, she mutilated her own fingers, she somehow shaved part of her head at some point, and she just acted very aggressively toward her guards. Eventually, in February of 2023, Daviet was transferred to a mental health institution. Now, while she was there, she saw doctor after doctor after doctor, and they all agreed that she had serious mental health issues. She was diagnosed with a serious and complex personality disorder, and they also ruled that Daviet had a pretty flexible relationship with the truth. She lied all the time, and she would say whatever she could to get away with whatever she wanted. It was a lot like what her sister Freya had told the police. She was manipulative, and she couldn't be trusted. And I think that's clear enough based on what she said during a hearing in June of 2023. In court, Daviet insisted that Lola came into the building with her completely voluntarily. But then Lola was too nervous to actually go into the actual apartment, so Daviet forced her inside of it. Then, in her words, quote, "I hit her a little. I wasn't feeling well, in fact. I did what I had to do. I overdid it a little, just to have my fun, and that's it." So again, she was changing up her story. She was also sounding very callous, like, I did what I had to do. I overdid it, but I just did it to have my fun. It's infuriating when you really think about it, right? Now, this was all a huge news story. Daviet was becoming very, very famous and well-known in the headlines, and the circumstances about the case made a lot of people really angry. But not just for the reason that you would probably think. Lola's murder was terrible. It was horrifying. I mean, the things this woman did to Lola are disgusting and vile. So obviously, people were outraged about all of that. But on social media and everywhere else, people were also getting worked up because Daviet wasn't in France legally. Like with her sister Freya, Daviet's visa had expired. So with that, people were also talking about the issue of immigration in general.
France is faced with a renewed and divisive debate over immigration, with politicians on the left and on the right trading accusations and fueling a discussion about who or what is responsible for the murder of a 12-year-old in Paris last week. The remains of Lola were found in a trunk outside the apartment block she lived with her family in the northeast of the French capital. The body bore marks of torture. The main suspect in this case is a 24-year-old Algerian national who's in police custody and was under orders to leave the French territory after her residence permit had run out. The case is still under investigation, but the leader of the far-right, Marine Le Pen, has called the French government responsible for the incident because of its lax immigration policy. Members of the administration of Emmanuel Macron have labeled this political appropriation of a tragedy and have requested that both the public and the opposition allow time so that the police and investigators can do their job. A silent protest in tribute to Lola was scheduled for later today, but was cancelled at the request of the family. A march is still set to take place on Thursday.
Now, Lola's family didn't like that her death was now getting caught up in this debate about the immigration laws in France. She was a sweet, loving little girl, and now she was gone. So that's where they wanted the focus to be, not on the immigration issues. Focus on Lola. The people who had known Lola did what they could to honor and remember her. Some of the people at her school even held a march in her honor, and Lola's parents joined in. At the end of the march, her mom gave a speech where she said, "It is these difficult times of extreme violence that the best rubs shoulders with the worst. The best is you here. The worst is the use of our daughter's image for commercial or political ends."
As pupils at the girls' secondary school paid tribute to their former classmate, people in the neighbourhood expressed their horror at the murder.
We're shaken. What happened was horrible. My children are traumatized.
I'm traumatized, the neighborhood is traumatized, all of France is traumatized. I think the whole world is.
On habite un quartier qui est calme et voilà, c'est l'horreur qui a rattrapé une vie tranquille, on va dire. On habite le quartier depuis des années et on vient témoigner un soutien à la famille, hein, juste en déposant un bouquet parce que comme beaucoup de gens, moi des gens, ça nous brise le cœur. Voilà, c'est insoutenable.
12 ans, pauvre gamine, une histoire de vengeance personnelle. C'est vraiment stupide, quoi. C'est plus aucun sens humain de rien, quoi.
So that was the situation. Lola's parents were trying to take control of the narrative, bring the focus back to where it belonged. And along the way, they also tried to set the record straight on some misinformation that was going around. For example, you'll remember how in one version of her confession, Daviet said that she killed Lola to get back at Lola's mom for not giving her that front door badge. But according to Lola's dad, that wasn't true. None of that ever even happened. In an interview, he said, "There is no badge story. She is the one who swiped her badge at the entrance of the apartment building. She came in first and my daughter arrived behind her. There is no badge story. It's bullshit." That's pretty crazy, because if it's true that Daviet did have a key card, I do have to wonder what her real motive could have been. If she wasn't trying to punish Lola's mom, why do you think she was so heartless to this little innocent 12-year-old girl? What was it about Lola that made Daviet want to target her rather than just any other little girl if she was just going to go out and find someone? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, none of it does. This whole thing, why she did it in the first place, why she sexually harmed Lola, why she forced her to take a shower. Did she do that by threatening Lola with a weapon? Why did she want her to take a shower in the first place? I mean, was the plan from the start to always lure Lola inside and kill her? Or was there some other plan that went wrong and resulted in a murder? And also, moreover than all of that, what was the reason for the 1 and the 0 on Lola's feet? The reason behind this still hasn't come out yet, and I am very interested to figure that whole thing out. I mean, again, what do you think it could mean? Now, in that same interview, her dad said, "I am surviving. I am not well. And maybe that's why I want to talk today, to free myself a little, because there comes a time when it has to come out. I'm not going well at all. In fact, she didn't just destroy a child's life. No, she destroyed an entire family. For a year, I fell back into my demons even though I hadn't drank for more than 3 years. What keeps me going today? I have 2 sons. I have a mother and I have a wife too. It's my family that keeps me going. I have to keep going for them. It's been a year and I'm devastated. Before the tragedy, I had a happy life. Until the end of my life, this day, October 14th, will be in my head. My daughter is my love and she will always remain the love of my life. This woman who took my daughter's life, she killed an entire family." Unfortunately, in February of 2024, Lola's dad died from a heart attack. And the family's lawyer released a statement after his death saying, "John had his head and his heart too close to hell since the acts committed against his daughter. He was going downhill. His heart attack is the epilogue of his descent into hell. We lost him from day one. We did everything and tried, but there was nothing that we could do anymore." Lola's mom, meanwhile, is still alive and still fighting, still trying to take back control over her daughter's story. In one interview, she said, My life will always be complicated. She was my life, my ray of sunshine. I will always have this scar. I feel a lot of anger towards this person, and I hope that the trial can help me understand the why and the how. I'm waiting to know what the other person is going to say, their answers. We always have to ask ourselves the question of why. Lola's older brother wrote a letter to a magazine about his sister, and in the letter he wrote, "I'm writing you this note already to tell you how much I miss you since you left to see the stars. Life will be very long without you." When it was Lola's birthday in July of 2023, her aunt wrote a tribute to Lola on Facebook saying, "Not a day goes by without me thinking of you. The morning when I wake up, when I say to myself, no, it's not possible. The day when a word, a gesture, a situation, a piece of music inevitably reminds me of you. In the evening, this question constantly haunts me. Why? Why you? Why that day? Why this hatred? Why did she decide that day to end your life?" As of right now, Daviet still has not gone to trial for Lola's murder, and it looks like her trial is now scheduled to begin in the fall of 2025, so we will have a little bit of a wait ahead of us to see whether justice or not will be served. And it's still super unclear what happened to Amin, whether he pled guilty or not, whether he's going to trial, or if he accepted some sort of plea deal. I feel like because he was arrested and charged, he had to be more involved somehow, but I don't know, what do you guys think? Does it seem unfair that he was charged for helping conceal a body when all he did was give her a ride and supposedly had no idea what was in that trunk and that suitcase? Or maybe they have some sort of reason to believe that he did know that there was a body in that trunk. I mean, remember, there also was supposedly visible blood on it, so how would you not know? Now, based on Daviet's statements and some statements from her lawyers, it appears that she's planning on pleading not guilty due to insanity.
Her lawyer is pushing for a mental health assessment.
An expert will determine whether my client is competent to stand trial for the acts she's accused of. She's innocent until proven guilty.
Maybe we'll get some answers to all of those questions about the crime itself, and maybe that will help some sort of resolution, but ultimately none of it will bring Lola back. As for Lola's family, they do think that the police handled the situation well, and they're glad that they took the disappearance seriously right from the beginning. They hope that Daviet gets punished, as she of course deserves, and they've also said that once justice is served, they feel like they finally will be able to move on with their lives. But it's still just that question of why haunts everyone, right? Myself included. Why Lola? Why the sexual element? Why the stabbing post-mortem? Why anybody? Was it a mental break? But why Lola? It just does not make sense to me. So I am very, very curious to hear what you guys think about this case in the comments and what you think those numbers on her feet meant. Was it a 0 and a 1, meaning it was her first victim? Could it have been flopped like her 10th victim? I don't know. What do those numbers indicate? Let me know all of your thoughts and theories below, and thank you so much for hearing Lola's story today. Until the next one, please stay safe.